Tomorrow morning, you will wake up, travel somewhere, and sell exactly 8 hours of your life. Not 7, not 9, 8. It feels like a natural unit of work, but nature never invented the 8-hour day. People did. And the strangest part is that it began as a demand for freedom, before becoming the schedule most of us cannot escape. So who decided that 1/3 of your day belongs to work? And why are we still living inside their answer? For most of human history, work did not begin at 9 and end at 5. It followed the task. A farmer worked until the field was planted. A fisher worked with tides and weather. An artisan might labor intensely when orders arrived, then slow down when they did not. This was not an easier world. It could be exhausting, dangerous, and uncertain. But time was experienced differently. In 1967, historian E.P. Thompson described this older pattern as task-oriented labor. The job told you when the work was finished. The clock did not. Then the factory changed the question. A machine could not wait for the sun, the harvest, or a worker's mood. It needed people to arrive together, move together, and repeat the same motions for as long as production continued. So employers began buying something more abstract than a finished task. They began buying time. Factory bells announced the beginning of work. Clocks measured lateness. Supervisors watched minutes. Workers who had once been paid for what they completed were increasingly paid for how long their bodies remained available. The clock did not merely measure the working day. It created it. And once work could be measured in hours, one question became unavoidable. How many hours could an employer claim? During the Industrial Revolution, the answer was often 10, 12, 14, or even more. 6-day weeks were common. Children worked beside adults. Long hours were not an unfortunate accident around the system. They were the system. Then in 1817, a Welsh industrialist and reformer named Robert Owen proposed a strange division of the day. 8 hours for labor, 8 hours for recreation, 8 hours for rest. It was mathematically elegant, 24 hours divided into 3 equal pieces. But it was not based on a biological discovery. Owen had not found a hidden organ that stopped functioning after 8 hours. He was proposing a moral boundary. Work should have a limit. A person should not exist only as labor. 8 was not science. It was a demand. And at first, even that demand sounded radical. In Melbourne, on 21st April 1856, stonemasons working on major construction projects put down their tools and marched toward Parliament House. They demanded 8 hours without losing their daily pay. They won. Their success was moral, but it was also practical. Melbourne was expanding rapidly. Skilled builders were difficult to replace, and the masons understood their leverage. The lesson was not simply that 8 hours was reasonable. It was that a reasonable demand still required power. Their symbol became 3 intertwined 8s. 8 hours labor, 8 hours recreation, 8 hours rest. But victories like Melbourne were rare islands inside a much larger industrial world. For millions of workers, shorter hours required decades of strikes, organizing, political pressure, and violence. In the United States, labor organizations selected May 1st, 1886 as the date when 8 hours should become the legal working day. Hundreds of thousands joined strikes and demonstrations. In Chicago, events surrounding the campaign led to the Haymarket affair. A bomb was thrown at police. Gunfire followed. Police officers and civilians died. 8 anarchists were prosecuted in a trial later condemned for its lack of evidence and fairness. 4 were executed. The fight over 8 hours had become a fight over who owned human time. In 1893, Illinois Governor John Peter Altgeld pardoned the surviving Haymarket defendants and attacked the trial as unjust. But the damage could not be reversed. Men had been imprisoned and executed, and May Day had become inseparable from the international demand for shorter hours. And the idea continued spreading. In 1916, the United States established an 8-hour standard for interstate railroad workers. In 1919, when the newly created International Labor Organization adopted its first convention, the subject it chose was working time. 8 hours a day and 48 hours a week for industry. Think about that. After a world war, governments gathered to design rules for a new international order. And one of the first problems they addressed was the length of the working day. Because by then, everyone understood that time was not a minor workplace detail. It was power. In the United States, the Fair Labor Standards Act arrived in 1938. It initially created a 44-hour threshold for overtime. 2 years later, that threshold fell to 40. The modern 5-day, 40-hour week had taken legal shape. But notice what had changed. Owen's formula divided a single day. The ILO's 1919 standard still imagined 8 hours across 6 days, 48 hours a week. The 5-day week was a separate victory. Ford Motor Company adopted a 5-day, 40-hour week for many factory workers in 1926, more than a decade before the American federal standard. Henry Ford argued that leisure was not wasted time. Workers needed time to live, and, conveniently, to buy and use the products mass industry produced. Rest had become humane. It had also become economically useful. But here is the reversal. The 8-hour day was created as a ceiling. Over time, it began to feel like a target. A movement had argued that no employer should take more than 8 hours. Modern culture gradually converted that protection into an expectation that a serious worker should always produce for 8, whether the work required it or not. The factory needed synchronized time because machines, materials, and bodies had to meet in one place. But much of modern work is not organized around an assembly line. You can finish a report early, solve a problem in 20 minutes, spend an afternoon staring at the same paragraph, have your best idea in the shower, on a walk, or at midnight. Creative and cognitive work does not arrive in 8 equal hourly packages. Yet, the container survives. We still use time as a substitute for value because time is easy to count. Achievement is messy. Presence is visible. So we measure the person at the desk, the green status light, the timestamp, the reply sent at 9:03, the calendar filled with rectangles. Productivity becomes evidence that you were present long enough to look productive. And technology did not destroy the old factory clock. It placed one in your pocket. The whistle became a notification. Clocking in became logging on. The supervisor became software that can record activity, response times, location, and availability. Many workers gained flexibility, but work also learned to cross walls. It entered bedrooms, dinner tables, weekends, and the few minutes that once belonged to nothing. The original slogan promised 8 hours of recreation and 8 hours of rest. But even a formal 8-hour shift rarely consumes only 8 hours. There is waking, dressing, commuting, waiting, preparing, recovering, and thinking about tomorrow. The legal boundary measures time under direct control. It does not measure the shadow work casts around it. Modern life often protects only the first 8. The rest must negotiate. And there is evidence that the old boundary is not sacred. In a major British trial conducted in 2022, 61 organizations reduced working hours for roughly 2,900 employees. Most participating companies continued afterward. Workers reported less stress and burnout, while business revenue was generally maintained. That does not prove every job can become a 4-day job. Hospitals, transport, retail, construction, care work, and countless other systems cannot simply close every Friday. But it proves something more important. The number is negotiable. It always was. The 8-hour day was one of the great victories of working people. It took a world where employers could consume almost every waking hour and drew a line through it. That line mattered. It still matters. But protecting a boundary does not require worshiping it forever. The mistake is not that humanity chose 8. The mistake is forgetting that humanity chose at all. Because once an invented system becomes old enough, it stops looking invented. It becomes normal, then natural, then invisible. Tomorrow morning, the clock will divide your life again. Work, rest, whatever remains. And perhaps the deepest question is not whether 8 hours is too long or too short. It is why a number chosen 2 centuries ago still gets to decide how much of your life belongs to you.